Hey folks, Jackdaw here. 20 years, one cult classic, two failed studios, and now, finally, a new team dares to raise the dead. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 has survived stake after stake, passed through corporate torpor, and clawed its way back from the shadows. This time, it's under the bloodied wing of the Chinese Room, and it's actually coming out to play this October. Game Informer went hands-on at their Brighton studio, interviewing the devs, and of course, playing the game. They have since returned with a blood-soaked cover story that indeed confirms you can be the most devious bastard in SE-A-TTLE. So in my true fashion, I am breaking every single thing this cover story revealed down. From story to combat to the clans to the protagonist to consequences and of course the game's entire development hell. I suppose you could say this is a post-mortem for a game that hasn't even been born yet. A vampire baby, born late, pale, craving blood. So, Renesmee? We start, fittingly, with Resurrection. The original Bloodlines launched in 2004 and flopped. Buggy, rushed, and buried by bigger releases at the time, like Half-Life 2 and Halo 2. The game sold just 72,000 copies. Troika Games shut down months later, but players kept Bloodlines alive. Mods had fixed the game. Word of mouth spread, the legend grew. The original became a cult classic. The question that lingered at the time: could we ever get a Bloodlines sequel? What would that even look like? 11 years later, in 2015, an eclipse stirred as Paradox bought White Wolf. By 2019, the miracle occurred. Bloodlines 2 was announced. Hard Suit Labs was developing. Brian Mitsoda, the original Bloodlines writer, was back. Hype built. They even gave it a release window Q1 2020. And then, well, if you're watching this video, you probably know how that went. The delays hit. Mitsoda was fired, the creative director gone. By early 2021, the game had been taken away from Hard Suit Labs entirely. Layoffs then followed, and Bloodlines 2 disappeared into the shadows. Just like the budget for Breaking Dawn Part 2's CGI baby. For 2 years, we heard absolutely nothing. And then, in 2023, a new name entered the crypt, the Chinese Room. If you know them, it's likely from Dear Esther, Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, or Amnesia, A Machine for Pigs. Very narrative-driven, atmospheric, some even walking sim, so to speak, divisive titles. Not the sort of a studio you'd expect to inherit a cursed, half-finished action RPG. But inherit it, they did. According to Game Informer, the specifics of the handover are hazy, part legal, part logistical, altogether emotional. What we do know that isn't wrapped in haze is that the new devs weren't starting from scratch, but it's not the same game either. Studio design director Alex Skidmore said it plainly: the two games are not alike. Some similar code base, but they rebuilt it completely. New combat, new story, new direction. Some pieces do remain. It's still set in Seattle, still at Christmas time. The same red sigil logo, even a Nosferatu character from a 2019 trailer, now renamed Tolly, is still skulking about. But the tone, systems, plot, structure, all new, all different. And so going into Bloodlines 2, it is not Bloodlines 1.5. It is not even a true sequel. It's something altogether stranger. A spiritual successor forged from the ashes of an actual one. No pressure at all, right? 2 studios down, 20 years of legacy and 6 years of development on 2 versions of a single game later. The stakes, fair to say, high. The Masquerade though, intact, at least for now. So Game Informer's preview begins as it should in full gothic fashion. They visited the studio on a grey overcast day, according to them ironic for a place called Brighton. But like, you came to the United Kingdom. What did you expect? Our weather alone has practically co-authored some of the best gothic literature of our time. Dracula and Wuthering Heights can attest to that alone. But I digress. Game Informer were greeted by Alex Skidmore, our studio design director mentioned before, Ian Thomas, the narrative director, and Jason Carl, the official storyteller of LA by Night and brand manager for White Wolf. Carl was there for the most important stuff. My favourite bit, the lore, because Bloodlines 2 is rooted in the world of darkness, specifically the 5th edition of Vampire the Masquerade. For context, the original 2004 game used the 3rd edition. This version reflects how vampires, kindred, more on the specific terminology later, but how they exist in the modern world, and how society has changed in the last 20 years. As Carl puts it best, vampires have to contend with surveillance, culture, social media, biometric tracking, and satellites. Things, I guess you could say, like TikTok, that didn't exist in 2004. And so in that regard, kindred, i.e. vampires, must evolve to survive. They can't rely on the old ways of 2004 anymore. Simply put, no more secret meetings in the fancy room. Now, the War of Ages has been a part of Vampire the Masquerade since the beginning, Carl says. In this flashpoint in time for Bloodlines 2, it is heating up considerably. And heating up is the perfect phrase for it, because our new protagonist is called Fire, or the Nomad, if you prefer their more ominous title. Just like me, they are a 400-year-old vampire waking up from something called torpor, which is a deep coma-like slumber ancient vampires just happen to fall into, only then to find themselves trapped in modern-day Seattle, unable to leave, marked by a strange sigil they don't recognize. Naturally, Fire is confused. Vampiric slumber will do that to you. But beyond dealing with millennial disorientation, Fire is then caught up in a vampire turf war fighting out in Seattle. So basically, we're going right back to Forks. Oh, and also, we are not alone in our head. Fire has an unexpected companion right in their noggin known as Fabian, a 100-year-old vampire with no memory of recent events and a much sunnier disposition than our own blunt, battle-weary Nomad. Fabian is the main companion throughout the game, and Game Informer described the dynamic as one of a contrast. Fire is more jaded and direct, while Fabian's, quote, enthusiasm for investigation brings levity and momentum, but together they work. For me, I immediately think of V and Johnny Silverhand in Cyberpunk, a brilliant way to bring about different angles, different perspectives, and of course, most importantly, the lore. Just like the original, Bloodlines 2 is a story-driven epic with multiple factions and key figures you can make your friend or foe. However, unlike the original, it is a modern, fast-paced, first-person action RPG. And this is where Game Informer really sink their teeth in as we get to their initial demo. For them, Fire was presented as female, though you can choose your own gender, and they wake up in a dark, abandoned building, starving and already being hunted. Within moments, we see Fire feeding on a security guard, and it's clear their powers have dulled over their long slumber. Having said that, she still has superhuman strength, telekinesis, and even the ability to glide. But most of her abilities must be unlocked gradually as the game progresses. The game holds off on letting you pick your clan at first, giving you time to understand the fundamentals. A smart decision choice, especially for players new to the series. And at this point, it's when the game starts teaching you about my most favourite thing in video games, the lore. Because Bloodlines 2 is a game full of proper nouns and specific terms. For example, as we touched on before, vampires ain't just called vampires, they're kindred. And everything from their laws to their particular terminology is steeped in decades of source book history. But for those who don't know their history books, the devs at the Chinese room seem to be easing new players in. And that's exactly where Fabian, the 100-year-old vampire in our noggin, is gonna help. because as Fire tries to escape a building, police show up, and Fabian offers an urgent reminder: obey the Masquerade. Just like Fight Club. The Masquerade is the #1 rule of this world. Humans may never know vampires exist. Break that rule and kindred society will come down hard, even if it was an accident. This is a mechanic that defined the original game, so it is good and expected to see it making a gigantic return. The scene ends with Fire reaching the rooftop, the camera pans across the dark Seattle skyline, and the title appears Bloodlines 2, and officially, we're in it. Fabian leads Fire to an abandoned apartment and starts catching her up. He also doesn't remember recent events, but he has been a vampire the whole century Fire's been asleep. So he gives us a crash course on what has changed. Apparently, vampires used to get away with a lot more, but the world's changed. Old tricks don't work anymore. And so in Seattle, phones are taboo. Surveillance is deadly. And as a fun meta joke just to show you how specific the law is going, Fabian jokes about how far young adult fiction has changed the way mortals perceive vampires. Which, I mean, with quotes like, "Say it out loud, say what I am," or "You're like my own personal brand of heroin." I get it. Even guns are more dangerous now than they were a century ago, and when Fire asks if America has a lot of them, Fabian just laughs. The world has changed, TikTok exists, the internet spreads information too fast. The Masquerade is even harder than ever to uphold, and Fire, 400 years out of step, has to learn the rules all over again. Now, believe it or not, but Bloodlines have always been the lifeblood of Vampire the Masquerade. Once Fire is out in Seattle and recovering her strength, you finally get to pick your clan, a staple born from both the tabletop and the original game, and your choice here determines not only your powers and combat style, but how the world sees you. And there are 6 total playable clans, 4 available straight at launch with 2 arriving later in DLC. But even after you choose one, you are not just locked in. As narrative director Ian Thomas clarifies, you can unlock almost every clan ability, no matter which you start with. This selection determines your starting skills and of which clan people will perceive you. So 4 clans at launch, 2 coming with DLC, each with their own particular vampire carnage. Your first clan is the Bruiser. Fist first vampires, fast punches, shoulder tackles and shockwave steps. When you feed mid-fight, your melee damage is gonna spike. You're not here to talk. Next is the Tremere. You're gonna throw crystallized blood like blades, blink across combat, explode enemies from within, feed, and their bodies turn to ash. Efficient, clinical, a bit terrifying, the one I'm most interested in immediately. Then you've got the Banu Hakim, stealth-based assassins with blades and rules. 1 strike to take the head off. Freeze time, vanish mid-fight, drain a room without alerting anyone. Game Informer called this one the Batman Clan. And last for now we have the Ventru, not to be mistaken with the Volturi. Control the room, wipe memories, charm crowds, turn enemies on each other. Feeding is going to boost your defense. Their power revolves around control of the minds, of crowds, and of outcomes. And most importantly, each clan comes with their own particular fashion style. Everything from tailored Ventru suits to Bruiser leathers and Tremor sigils stitched into long coats. As you play, you unlock abilities from other clans. Finish a skill tree and you earn that clan's perk, a passive that will reshape how you fight. Now, something very important that sets Bloodlines 2 out from any other vampire game, Fire isn't some newly turned vampire climbing the ranks. They're old, powerful, known, the Nomad. And this title actually means something in Seattle. Some revere her, other kindred are afraid of her. The details of course are murky, that's intentional. You are stepping into a myth that already exists. And part of the game is deciding which parts are true. Now the name Fire, as cheesy and corny as it sounds, is chosen by the player after spotting a banned poster in her apartment. Everything else, their history, reputation and identity, is already in motion. In the narrative director's own words, it's a game of consequences of being a monster. Fire's not a blank slate. Quite like V from Cyberpunk, they have a defined personality. Dry, direct, tired of everyone's nonsense, but you still shape her tone in conversation, choosing between options that all sound like her rather than good versus evil. So think more like Commander Shepard than the Inquisitor. NPCs will treat you differently depending on your clothes, your actions, and your past. Wear something seductive, and some characters lean in. Wear something intimidating, and others might back off or challenge you. Reactions aren't binary. Some will approve, some will mock you. Every choice feeds into how your version of the Nomad is remembered. And so from here, Fire and Fabian set off to recover Fabian's lost memories. And finally, we're free to explore Seattle. It's the first foray into the game's open world, which you'll traverse to get from mission to mission. And here is where Bloodlines 2 introduces its tabletop roots with the reintroduction of a feature called Blood Resonance. In this world, human blood isn't all the same. Some morsels feel emotions so intensely than others, tell me about it, that their blood absorbs it, like emotional seasoning for the soul. You drink that, you're going to gain that feeling's resonance, which can boost specific attributes, enhance certain clans, or unlock cross-clan upgrades. But here is the twist. You can't just bite and go, no. You've got to make those particular humans feel those emotions first. Want sanguine blood? That's tied to joy and arousal. You will need to charm someone, flirt, maybe take them somewhere private. Choleric blood? That is rage, jealousy, start a fight, insult somebody, let them stew in anger, then strike. Fabian even jokes that when a mugger tries to rob you, it's basically a buffet. And then there's melancholic blood. Fear and sadness. The loner on the street. The anxious wanderer. If you corner them, isolate them, let the terror build, that blood becomes more potent, haunting, but effective. The devs describe this mechanic of emotionally manipulating humans into feeling a particular way and then taking their blood as emotional alchemy. Not long into Fire's journey through Seattle, they cross paths with Benny Muldoon, a towering enforcer of the Camaralia, the old guard vampiric court that enforces the Masquerade. In theory, Benny is essentially a sheriff. In practice, he's a monster. Even Fabian seems nervous around him. But he has been hunting thin bloods for sport. Vampires with diluted bloodlines, often treated as second-class citizens. Even among predators, that crosses a line. Fire stands their ground, but Benny gives a chilling ultimatum. You've got 24 hours to get out of the city. But here is the key. That scene can play out very differently, depending on your dialogue choices and your starting clan. This encounter can escalate or de-escalate in multiple ways. You might provoke him, you might avoid a fight, or you might say the wrong thing and trigger something far worse. So basically, don't be speaking the bullshit unless you're ready to handle it. And this is just a strong sign that Bloodlines 2 is once again putting real weight behind choice and consequence. Back on the rooftops, Fire begins to unlock the full might of her Banu Hakim toolkit. The player uses an ability called Split Second, a supernatural burst so fast it essentially freezes time for everyone. She then dashes through enemies, invisible and unstoppable. One enemy is drained from behind, another is decapitated with a slash from bladed hand. And in a wonderful over-the-top moment, the player used telekinesis to hurl a severed head at a distant foe. Grotesque, ridiculous, and bloody glorious. Telekinesis, by the way, isn't tied to any specific clan. It's available to everyone right from the start and is required for some puzzle solving. And the final thing in this demo, the player visits Mrs. Thorne, a tremor contact who grants a new clan spell, Recall. It's a teleportation ability that lets you return to a marked spot, obliterating anything standing on it. Think of it like a magical proximity mine. And thus, the demo ends there. From what Game Informer saw, Bloodlines 2 leans heavily into consequence. Your clan choice shapes how you fight. Your clothes influence how people treat you. Dialogue choices ripple out. Break the Masquerade and it's over. Kindred Law doesn't care how powerful you are. That That sense of pressure of having something to lose is core to this experience. But to be frank, the real story here isn't about fire as exciting as it sounds. It's about the game. We are 2 studios down, years of silence, and Bloodlines 2 has already lived through more upheaval than most franchises survive. And yet, slight traces of Troika and Hardsuit Labs remain. I suppose we could call them ghosts in the code. The game Paradox is releasing this October. It isn't those former developers. However, it wouldn't exist without their previous attempts. And so after all that, Bloodlines 2 is finally waking up. Fitting for a vampire story after all. The question that lingers now is, when exactly in October is Bloodlines 2 coming out? Because we still don't know. Like, Halloween would be perfect. Is it going to be competing with The Outer Worlds 2? What's going on here? Either way, we don't have long until we get to fully sink our teeth into this game. I'm sure we'll be getting that release date very soon, probably at Gamescom, or we'll be hearing about a delay if that is on the cards. With that said, let me know all of your thoughts down below on Bloodlines 2. Are you excited? Are your teeth sunken in just like mine? What are your thoughts on the story, on Fire, the Nomad, any kind of character you have in mind so far? I'll be covering this game as we get even closer to launch, so be sure to subscribe to stay in the latest on similar dark fantasy games just like this one. But of course, until next one, I've been Jackdaw, and I should go. Whoa, 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 whoa.